I'm Cara.
And together, we are functionally literate. We can read.
And we can write.
We can write? I don't know. We've never done that on this show.
Not on this show, but, at other places.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do we write?
Well, I write fan fiction.
Oh, right. I write notes.
Well, I'm a degenerate. What do you want?
Oh, okay. Today, we are discussing The Princess Bride.
Yippee.
Chapters 7 and 8. These are the chapters that conclude the story of The Princess Bride. So, let's recap. Where did we leave off, Cara?
Well, we left off. They were, our intrepid heroes, Inigo and Fezzik, were getting ready to head into the Zoo of Death to rescue Wesley. So that way Inigo could use Wesley to kill Count Rugen.
Chapter 7. The Wedding. How the Turk and the Spaniard traversed the Zoo of Death to recover the man in black, and how they returned him to life with a miracle.
How do you feel about all that?
I find this shakes out differently in the movie than it does in the book.
It does, because they cut out the Zoo of Death.
They cut out the Zoo of Death. And I completely understand why they cut out the Zoo of Death.
I don't. It was fun. I liked this scene in Chapter 7.
Well, it's hard to film that kind of thing. It's hard to fit that kind of thing into a movie. And, back in the 80s, everything had, kind of a strict, hour and a half run time. It's not like today where you go to a theater to see Oppenheimer and you're there for 3 hours.
Or Australia.
And then you're there for 3 or 4 hours.
Or Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League. It was a good, clear-cut 90 minutes.
Good, clear-cut 90 minutes.
No. But what I really enjoyed about... Because Chapter 7, it starts with them just going straight into the Zoo of Death. And what I enjoyed about it was... Inigo knew that there was some traps, there were some tricks, but at every opportunity he was exactly wrong about what the traps or tricks were.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the things, is that Inigo's a very smart guy.
Yeah.
He's the wizard. He is a wizard
of
fencing. He's very smart. He's strategic. He knows what he needs to do. However, he lets his mind get ahead of him. And that's why Fezzik is such a good foil to Inigo, because that's never a problem for Fezzik.
No, it's not at all.
They balance each other out, which is why I personally am of the camp they should kiss. Let them kiss, Goldman.
You think Inigo and Fezzik should be gay?
I think they should kiss. Let them kiss, Goldman. Let them kiss. I'm like a little child playing with my Barbie dolls, saying, now kiss.
Seems a bit of an anachronistic concept for this book, I think.
I mean, I get that. However, we did have in the movie, Tyrone, I love to watch you work, but I have my wedding to plan, a 500th anniversary to celebrate, and my wife to murder. I'm swamped.
Oh, you mean him and Count Rugen?
Yeah, Humperdink and Count Rugen.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that they don't have some little bit of love for each other.
So, let's see. Inigo he's cautious about entering in the first place, but then he reasons, oh, you know what? It's fine, because we knocked out the albino, and the albino probably was going to lock this up when he was done with whatever he was doing, but we knocked him out, so we're good. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then Fezzik's like, in his mind, he realizes there's no lock on this door. But I don't want to slow Inigo down. I want to get moving. So let's just go. First level is nothing. What's the second level?
Second level. Oh my gosh. I have to remember what the second level is. Spiders, I think. Wait, no. So the second level is enemies of strength. Right, so you have anacondas, you have crocodiles, you have rhinoceri.
alligators.
You got alligators.
Yeah.
That are 20 feet long.
Yeah. So they just pretty much run through that immediately to get to level 3.
Mm-hmm.
On their way to level 3, there's a trap. The door locks behind them and the lights go out. And they panic.
Because Fezzik is scared of the dark.
Yeah. And so, and Inigo's scared too, but they're like, are you scared? No. Are you scared? No. Well, then let's not be scared together. We will hug, and I will have my sword out.
And I will kiss you.
And you will have your fist out.
Wait, no. That kiss was in my head.
Yes. And we will walk forward together, and that's what they do, and then an anaconda drops down on them. Or is it an anaconda? It's a big, coiling snake.
Yeah.
And
they're doing rhymes for each other.
They're doing rhymes for each other, which is very cute.
Yeah, they're doing rhymes.
Because Fezzik needs rhymes to keep calm or something. It just cheers him up.
Yeah.
And so this big snake is just coiling around them, and it seems like they're done for. And Inigo's like, break us out. And Fezzik's like, I can't. And then he's like, oh, damn. I had such good rhymes for you. And Fezzik can't abide this. He's like, what rhymes? What rhymes?
You're not going anywhere until I know those rhymes.
And so that...
And then Inigo says, actually, didn't have any rhymes. I just had to do something to get you into action.
Which was to beat the snake to death.
Yeah.
And Fezzik's real mad about that and storms off.
My only friend in all my life turns out to be a liar.
That's right.
Oh my goodness, this poor...
Yeah, so they storm off to
the fourth level.
I thought it was the 3rd level.
Nope, that happens on the 3rd level. Snake happens on the 3rd level.
I thought the snake happened on the way down to the 3rd level.
Nope, snake happens on the 3rd level.
Okay. Well, what happens on the 4th level? Or which level? I'm confused.
So, in the 3rd level, levels 1 and 2, level 1, nothing happens. Level 2, the lights go out. Level 3, the snake drops on him. Level 4, there was a straight staircase, but it was completely dark, and the opening at the far end was invisible.
Bats.
And then we get the king bats.
King bats. And Fezzik's terrified, and Inigo doesn't know why. And Fezzik's like, rabies! Rabies! Which is interesting to me, because that's not really something that Europeans worry about with their bats. Like, that's a very common problem in America. American bats, you don't want to fuck with them. In Europe, bats don't have rabies. So I think that's William Goldman's influence bleeding through a little bit. And then there's this wonderful scene where Inigo just skewers all of these bats on his sword like a kebab.
And Inigo is talking about, he thinks about a person who he spent studying under, a summer studying under. The only Scot who ever understood swords, which I think is absolutely a hilarious sentence.
Why is that?
Because you have William Wallace from Scotland. And that's not who William Goldman names. He says Macpherson. And Macpherson is a cranky old codger.
Yeah.
Who, as soon as Inigo masters something, he's like, yeah, well, what about this, huh? What about that, Spaniard? How are you going to survive that, Spaniard? And it's like...
What are you going to do when you're blinded by acid, Spaniard?
Survive that, Spaniard! So Inigo is just skewering all these bats with his sword. Yeah. Thinking about this grumpy old Scottish codger.
Yeah. He's like, I have to remember my training with Macpherson. And so like once this is done, Inigo is very disappointed.
And he's some giant you are.
And Fezzik's like, but you're a liar. And so then they forgive each other.
Yeah, he says, I made a mistake before. My dad used to trick me, so I'm not mad at you anymore. Is that all right with you? It's all right with me.
You mean you'll forgive me completely for saving your life if I completely forgive you for saving mine?
You're my friend, my only one.
Pathetic.
That's what we are. Athletic.
That's very good. And that's how they knew everything was fine.
Yeah.
And so then they go to the next level, which is nothing, which freaks Inigo out.
Yeah.
He can't handle that it's nothing. He's like, what is it? What's here? What's going on?
Yeah.
I know there's something here. And so Fezzik's like, oh shit. And Inigo's panicking. And Inigo can't panic because then if he panics, I can't panic. I need to panic so he won't panic. So then he just fucking charges the door, which turns out to be the best thing that he could have done. I love here how, like, just their lack of wherewithal, it basically is what saves them, right? Because Inigo's panicking because he can't see anything. He can't, or, I mean, what he sees is a well-lit room with nothing in it. And he's walking up to this door and he's like, wait, no, this is wrong. There's something in here that's gonna, like, if I could see it, I could fight it, but there's nothing here. And then he's like, I'm Inigo Montoya the Wizard, come for me!
Mm-hmm.
Just...
And Fezzik's like, listen, if the whole brains of the operation falls apart, then that's a problem.
Yeah. So
he just
charges this fucking door and smashes it. And then the recluse, which was posed under the doorknob, prepared to bite anyone that tries to open the door, starts scurrying. Inigo sees it, squishes it. Perfect. Mm-hmm. They go into the final room in the Zoo of Death.
Mm-hmm.
The Man in Black is dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's unfair.
It's unfair. And they're like, no, I do not accept this. So we're going to take him to Miracle Max.
Yeah.
And then we get a POV shift. Now it's Miracle Max.
Oh, God. And I love Miracle Max.
Go on.
Miracle Max is such a nice character. You know, I feel like Miracle Max is a little bit of Goldman's self-insert.
You think so?
Almost. Yeah, you know, I don't think that Wesley or Inigo or Fezzik are Goldman's insert. I feel like Max is the real voice of Goldman.
This cranky Jewish guy telling everyone what to do.
Well, he's not necessarily, is he? I don't think he's Jewish in the book necessarily. There's the implications for sure.
There's a moment where he talks about that. Hang on.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, here. One last thing. Hiram, my editor, felt the Miracle Max section was too Jewish in sound, too contemporary. I really let him have it on that one. It's a very sore point with me, because, just to take one example, there was a line in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid where Butch said, I got vision and the rest of the world wears bifocals. And one of my genius producers said, that line's gotta go. I don't put my name on this movie with that line in it. And I said, why? And he said, they didn't talk like that then. It's anachronistic. I remember explaining, Ben Franklin wore bifocals. Ty Cobb was batting champion of the American League when these guys were around. My mother was alive when these guys were alive, and she wore bifocals. We shook hands and ended enemies, but the line stayed in the picture. And so here the point is, if Max and Valerie sound Jewish, why shouldn't they? You think a guy named Simon Morgenstern was Irish Catholic? Funny thing, Morgenstern's folks were named Max and Valerie, and his father was a doctor. Life imitating art, art imitating life. As well, he sends Fezzik out to get a Holocaust cloak.
Yeah.
Which is a cloak that catches on fire.
Yeah.
So he can collect some special ash that would kill him or something. Without the cloak.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Go easy on me. It was the last day of school yesterday.
I'm not going hard on you. I'm just
You're bullying me.
Okay, then I will double down and call you a dummy dum dum who didn't know that Miracle Max is actually Jewish.
You know what?
Goldman's Jewish, right?
Goldman is Jewish.
Because he has a lot to say about Jews.
Goldman is Jewish, yes.
Okay, cool.
Goldman is Jewish.
Cool. Represent.
Or was Jewish.
Represent.
Before he passed away.
Represent. When did he die, anyway?
Oh, God. 2019?
2019.
2019, I want to say.
Not too long ago.
2018 or 2019. I know because I was out of college, because I got the news. My dad called me in a McDonald's parking lot, because I was in the McDonald's drive-thru, and I was getting ready to order a 10-piece McNugget meal. And my dad called me and I said, hey, what's up? I'm ordering a 10-piece McNugget meal. And he said, Cara, Goldman's dead. And I started crying. And the lady in the drive-thru line, like over the headset was like, are you okay? And I went, no. And I pulled out and went home.
This episode is not brought to you by McDonald's.
Because I cried in their parking lot when William Goldman died.
Were we together?
We were together.
Did you tell me about this?
I did.
What did I say?
You were like, oh, I'm sorry.
This was very early on in our relationship.
This was very early on in our relationship. You hadn't even started considering reading The Princess Bride yet. You hadn't even seen it yet.
Mm-mm.
You were like, what's the deal? And I was like, oh, you motherfucker. Guess what we're doing?
I didn't know.
And then I made you watch it.
Yeah. So there's this. So anyway, so Miracle Max. Inigo and Fezzik go knocking on his door, and it's like, oh, there was this tall guy. There's this big tall guy and this skinny guy. And they were like, hey, we need a miracle. And he's like, I don't do miracles anymore. And they're like, oh, but we really, really need a miracle. It's for a really good reason. And he's like, let me go talk to my witch. So he goes downstairs and talks to his witch, who's his wife. She's not really a witch, but she knows enough to pretend to be a witch. Because it's very important for a miracle man to have a witch.
Yeah.
What is all this? Like, what is this? I don't get this whole thing with the miracle man and the witch.
You know, I think it's just like, it's just, you know, that doctor-nurse thing.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's his take on, like, magic in his universe, because this is, like, kind of a high fantasy book, you know?
There's, like, pretty much no magic.
It's the Goldman lampooning on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it's his take on this, like, magic element of fantasy, I think. My favorite part about Miracle Max and Valerie is in the movie initially, Rob Reiner wanted Mel Brooks to play Miracle Max.
Makes perfect sense.
I mean, Rob Reiner's dad, Carl Reiner, and Mel Brooks were a comedy pair. They were really close friends, you know, like,
sure.
He grew up with Mel Brooks in his life, and he said, hey, Mel, would you do this? And Mel Brooks said, no, because the instant I sign on to this project, it's going to become a Mel Brooks movie, and I don't want that for this project. I want this to stand on its own. I don't want it to be like, I don't want to overshadow it.
To be fair.
Because this was, like, at the height of Mel Brooks's, like, popularity. Like, he had already done Young Frankenstein. He had already done Blazing Saddles. He had already done Spaceballs, I think, at this time.
Makes perfect sense.
Like,
I mean, how many movies can we think of now where a very well-known actor was in a movie for, like, 5 minutes?
And
that's all
became that. It became that. Yeah. I mean, the amount of gifs I saw when, what was it? The video game movie with Ryan Reynolds. Chris Evans was in it for like 2 seconds.
Fall Guy?
No.
That
That's
was,
another movie. That has Ryan Gosling in it,
right.
and it just came out. And I've heard it's absolutely delightful.
Free Guy.
Yeah, Free Guy. Like, the amount of times that I saw Chris Evans' face in that movie, like, in GIFs, I was like, oh, wow, he must, like, actually really be in this.
It was literally
like a 2-second cameo, and everybody was like, oh my god, Chris Evans was in this movie.
It was a really hype cameo.
To be fair, it was a really hype cameo.
But, circling back, Mel Brooks was right. So instead, who did we get to be Miracle Max?
We got Billy Crystal.
And Billy Crystal stole the show for the few minutes that he was in the movie.
Oh, it was so good. Carrie Elwes and they had to put a dummy on the table during that scene because Carrie Elwes just couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah.
Because Billy Crystal would just go off on a tear.
Yeah.
And he would just improv for forever.
They had Billy Crystal
and I'm pretty sure that Mandy
day.
Patinkin cracked a rib because he was holding back his laughter so hard that he literally cracked a rib.
Yeah. It was all in the memoirs. Yeah, he was on set for like a day, and they recorded so much of him just riffing.
Yeah.
And they had to cut so much of that.
And Carol Kane as Valerie is such an underrated performance. Like, I love Carol Kane, because Carol Kane and Billy Crystal I'm pretty sure they were together at that time. Like, I'm pretty sure they were, like, romantically together. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't recall. It's been a while since I've read
We have the
memoirs.
internet. She was in a relationship with actor Woody Harrelson from 1986 to 1988. She has never been married. She was not with Billy Crystal.
No.
That was just me being a child and being like, oh, but they would be cute together.
You wanted to ship them.
I wanted to ship them as a baby.
From what I recall in the
wee
memoirs, all she said about it really was he was a joy to work with. And she told a story or two about what it was like working with him on that movie.
I mean, I adore their chemistry.
Yeah.
In this.
No,
because
they were great.
there's a lot of times where I will quote, I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. And, you know, liar!
Yeah,
it's so good.
So that's what's funny here, right? So he's really resistant to do a miracle at all. He goes talks to his wife about it downstairs. He's like, if they don't have 50 gold pieces, I'm not doing it. I will not do a miracle for anything less than 50.
Yeah, and Inigo says 65 is what we got.
And he's like, I've never done a miracle for this little.
And he says, no good, they only got 20
to her. And she knows.
No good, they only got 20.
She knows he's lying, but she doesn't want to call him out on it, which I thought was interesting. Like, I took a note on this. I was like, this I think is interesting, because if it was you and me, you would have totally called me out. But then it does reach a point where it's just too much.
I would hate to have it on my conscience if we didn't do a miracle when nice people were involved. You're a pushy lady. Like, it's just so, the banter they have.
She also is like, well, I mean, you know, if they've only got 20, that's enough to get chocolate powder. We're almost out of chocolate powder. We wouldn't be able to get you your hot chocolate. And he's like, oh, well, you know, that's important. So, okay, all right, fine. I'll do the miracle. And so then, like, he takes this, what was it?
True love. He's a bellows crammer.
He takes and he
sticks it in Wesley's mouth.
Fills up his lungs.
What's so important you gotta come back from the dead for?
What's it worth coming back for? What you got waiting for you?
And then he says,
and he goes on this whole tangent
about
tickling someone to life.
Yeah.
Like, the guy came back to life just so he could stop tickling him. And then finally he's like, Wesley's like, true love.
And Inigo says, that's worth coming back for. And he's like, it would be, if that's what he said.
That's not
what he said.
That's not what he said.
He said, to bluff, by which he meant, obviously, to bluff. Clearly, he's either involved in a shady business or a card game and wishes to win, and that is certainly not reason enough for a miracle. I'm sorry, I never change my mind once it's made up. Goodbye, take your corpse with you.
Liar!
Back, witch!
I'm not a witch! I'm your wife!
Ah.
So he does eventually consent to just doing the thing.
And he says, Valerie, we've been married 80 years. How can you do this to me? Prince Humperdink was right to fire you. Don't say that name of my hut, Valerie. You made a pledge to me you'd never breathe that name. Prince Humperdink, Prince Humperdink, Prince Humperdink.
Yeah. So this is the moment where she's finally had enough. She just calls him out on all of his bullshit. Like, look, you're a fraud, and there's a reason why you were fired.
And he's like, how dare you?
These are nice people, and you help them.
And Inigo says he will stop Prince Humperdink's marriage, and that's what gets Max.
That's the thing.
It's the pettiness for me. And that's where I relate to Max, because I have a hard time getting motivated to do things sometimes. But
you'll be petty.
I'll be petty.
Yeah.
I will do anything to be petty.
Yeah.
As I tell my students, I hold grudges.
Yeah.
I don't forget.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah.
Like a damn elephant. I will hold a grudge.
Yeah.
And sometimes the only thing that keeps me going is spite.
Yeah. And
that is worthy. That's something that I think is beautiful.
And so then, the problem is that so Miracle Max has like a weird gauge for death. There's sort of dead, and then mostly dead, and then there's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so while they were all talking and arguing, Wesley slipped from sort of dead to mostly dead. And it's like, oh shit, you're gonna need a phantasmagoria to succeed here. And so he sends them out on this, like, this is where Goldman cuts it. He cuts 20 pages from Morgenstern's story and is like, hey, yeah, so there's this whole bit that felt very Wizard of Oz, which of course is silly because this book was written before The Wizard of Oz. But I know that if I included this part, everyone would be like, hey, this sounds too much like The Wizard of Oz. So I cut it. And where he had to, let's see. Fezzik had to acquire a Holocaust cloak so he doesn't burn to death collecting Holocaust mud.
Mm-hmm.
And what does Inigo do? Inigo...
Where is it? Inigo is getting frog dust.
Inigo's getting frog dust. So yeah, they go and do this whole bit. And then this is where Morgenstern goes on his rant about Jewish folk and how it totally makes sense for a Jew to be in this book. It's totally fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
And so then Inigo is like appalled at what Max produces. He's like, that's it? And Max is like, what's wrong with it? Like,
It's like a lump of clay the size of a golf ball. And then Morgan's like, hey, this is not anachronistic. Golf balls existed in Scotland. 700 years ago.
And so then...
And Inigo studied with Macpherson the Scot.
Yeah.
Everything Morgenstern wrote is historically accurate. Read any decent book on Florinese history.
Oh,
Which
Goldman.
I think, honestly, if I were ever to get a PhD, part of my dissertation would be writing the book on Florinese history.
You mean the totally, completely fictional book on Florinese history?
I don't know what you're talking about. Florin is a real place.
Florin, the totally real place.
Yeah, and Morgenstern was real. This is an abridgment. I don't know what you're talking about.
So, to top it all off, Valerie coats this lump of clay-looking thing in chocolate. So now it's a big old chocolate ball, the size of a golf ball.
Mm-hmm.
There's this bit here where Miracle Max says that once he takes it, he'll be good for an hour, but then after they leave, he's like, oh, drat. I wonder if it actually will be good for an hour. I think it might actually only be good for 40 minutes. And then Valerie's like, well, what's 40 minutes to an hour? They're going to be under a time constraint anyways. And so, cut to, they have returned to the castle. Fezzik climbs them up on top of this freaking castle wall.
Well, we also there's a bit in between.
What did I
where
skip?
Humperdink and Yellen
are
talking about
Yellen wants to resign because Humperdinck's been going on and on about how we will be attacked.
The Gildurians, of course.
The Gildurians will attack. It will happen.
It will happen.
Yellen's like, I must resign. I'm sorry. My spies have failed me. Like I cannot find any sign of what you're telling me is going to happen. If you have this information and I don't, clearly I am not good at this. I resign. And so Humperdink is like,
I do not accept your resignation. You are doing a capable job. There is no plot. I shall slaughter the queen myself this very evening. You shall run Gilder for me after the war, and I'll get back on your feet.
And Yellen's like, oh, well, that's all right then.
Yeah, well, that's all right then. Like, oh my god, fine.
So then the whole thing with Fezzik, like, using his immense strength to haul both this corpse and Inigo up on top of the castle wall. He forces, again with his immense strength, because rigor mortis has set in, forces Wesley to sit up, and then they crane his head back perfectly so they can shove this not golf ball down his throat. And then they argue for a bit because Wesley's like, oh, it's hopeless. This is a hopeless situation. What do we have? And he goes like, we have your brains, my wit, and Fezzik's strength. And he's like, that's all we have. We're doomed. How am I supposed to get around? And they're like, well, we have a wheelbarrow. And he's like, well, you should have mentioned that.
Yeah.
Now we can do this. We have a wheelbarrow.
The way that the way that Cary Elwes delivers a line, my brain, your strength, and his steel against 100 troops, and you think a little head jiggle is supposed to make me happy. It is so satisfying. And it's so satisfying. They really cast this movie perfectly.
Yeah.
They cast it perfectly. And I get really mad when I hear people talking about, oh, we should remake The Princess Bride. I get so mad because why would you mess with perfection that way? Why would you tamper it? Like, I don't even know. I don't even want to think about any other actors playing these roles.
The only reason they should ever make another movie is if someone wanted to take a crack at Buttercup's baby.
Well, I've heard a few different things about making another movie. Like, someone said, like, oh, it could be Fred's character, like, the little boy is an adult now, and he has a daughter of his own, and he's telling the story, and so we're seeing it from her point of view. And she cuts in at different times than he did, so that way we get different, like, interactions.
So it'd be a retelling, not exactly a reboot.
Yeah, it'd be a retelling, not exactly a reboot, so we're seeing it from, like, her imagination instead of his.
That'd be cool.
I, personally, am a fan of The Muppets Princess Bride.
That would be fun. That would be really fun.
I would love a Muppets version of The Princess Bride.
That would be so cute. Who would be Wesley?
Wesley. It'd have to be Kermit. It'd have to be Kermit.
Wait, Buttercup's gotta be Miss Piggy.
Buttercup's gotta be Miss Piggy.
I don't like that.
Buttercup's gotta be Miss Piggy. And I think it'd be hilarious if Humperdink was the only human. And that was played by Cary Elwes.
Circling back. The way this fucking thing ends is with
what I'd give for a Holocaust Coke. Well, we can't help you there. Oh, I can. Fezzik just pulls it out of his pocket.
Like, oh, I've got one of those. And then we go and we transition to Buttercup, who is she has the utmost confidence that
Wesley is going to come get her.
There's no doubt in her mind. She is so calm throughout all of this. She's like, there's no problems here. Even though the wedding is being bumped up by a half hour, she's like, nah, Wesley would have planned for that. He's got a contingency. She has the utmost faith in him, which I think is very sweet.
I love how devoted she is to him.
Yeah.
Like, people gave her shit for saying, hey, I'll marry you if you let him go free. But she loves him, dude. Yeah. She already lost him once. She doesn't want to lose him again. She doesn't want him to die.
Do anything.
I don't think that she was selfish in that regard.
No.
Like, I feel like she was way too hard on herself, the poor girl.
Yeah.
You know, she was so hard. She was having nightmares. Horrible, horrible nightmares.
Yeah. And so,
then Yellen,
there was this commotion, and Buttercup's like, great. What about Yellen?
Yellen is by the gate.
Yeah.
Because Fezzik is screaming at the top of his lung, I am the Dread Pirate Roberts, and there will be no survivors.
While wearing a flaming Holocaust cloak.
And Yellen is like, I'm upset. I'm upset. And he's like, what's happening? But it was only when the giant got halfway down the incline that he suddenly happily burst into flame and continued his trip, saying, no survivors, no survivors.
In a manner that could only indicate deadly sincerity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The brute squad starts screaming and they start running away.
I would too. I see a man on fire.
I think if I saw a giant
man on fire.
But you gotta keep in mind, I am a very short 5'4" woman.
Yeah.
I know that I am prey.
Mm.
I have a prey mentality.
Mm.
I see something that tall.
Yeah.
I see someone that tall. I'm immediately like, who are you? What do you want? What do you want with me? Where'd you come from? What are you doing?
Chapter 8, Honeymoon. How the Turk, the Spaniard, and the man in black saved the princess from her betrothed.
Honeymoon.
The honeymoon.
Oh, man. And this...
Which is a misnomer. There's no honeymoon.
There is no honeymoon here.
There's no honeymoon here. So, yeah, there is this whole thing with with Yellen, where they
I have no
confront-
key.
Yeah, they're like, give us the key.
I have no key.
And Wesley knows he has a key.
And he says Fezzik tears arms off.
Yeah.
And, oh, you mean
oh,
this
you mean
key.
this key? There you go.
Good man, Yellen. Yellen, you're a good man.
Yeah.
You're very easily confused. But you've got the spirit.
The problem was they were too late. They got in at 5:34, and Buttercup.
The wedding ended at 5:31.
Yep.
Which, the Archdean marriage. Which
is a dream within a dream.
Which we had my Aunt Helen married Ryan and I back in 2021.
Yeah.
And she opened our wedding ceremony with this speech.
She did. She, fortunately, said it legit. She didn't go, a marriage is a dream within a dream. The dream of love wrapped within the greater dream of everlasting West. Eternity is our friend, remember that. And love will follow you forever. Man and wife, say that. I'm not there yet. You're there now.
Man and wife, you're man and wife. No, it's 5:31.
Yeah. So there's this bit where the Count sees Inigo and is like, I recognize those slashes, but he doesn't have time to reminisce. He just sees this guy charging at him, so he says, he locks the door and runs.
Yeah, hello. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
And in reply, the Count did a remarkable and unexpected thing. He ran.
He turned and ran. It was now 5:37.
Yeah. So he's, Inigo's trying to chase after him, but he can't because the door is locked. So he's like, Fezzik, get this door open. And he's like, but I can't. I have to cart Wesley around in a wheelbarrow. And Wesley's like, just do it. Just do it. Go and help him. So he first, Fezzik tells Inigo, just break the door down. You can do it. No, he can't. He's like a little thing. So he can't, he tries, and of course he fails.
He's a slender little guy.
And so then he has Fezzik do it. Fezzik has to hit this door 4 times. The 4th time, he just kind of leapt into the air to hit it. And so once he breaks it down, Fezzik's like, what do I do now? And he's like, go back to Wesley. Wesley's gone. Yeah,
Wesley's gone. But before that, the king and queen come down, and they miss the wedding. And so Humperdink says, hey, there's a lot going on. Will you take my bride up to her bedchamber? And they're like, yeah, sure. And poor Buttercup is like, he didn't come for me.
Well, she's not lost all hope yet. She's still confident.
Yes, she has.
Did she?
She has. Because she immediately is like, well, I guess I'll kill myself. There was no Wesley, no sweet Wesley. He had not seen fit to come for her.
Yeah, okay.
She gave a terrible sigh, not so much of sadness as of farewell. When she got to Humperdinck's room, it would be all done. He had a splendid collection of swords and cutlery. And then as soon as she gets into the royal chamber, the prince's chamber, she goes to the wall display of weaponry. The time was then 5:46.
Well,
so she immediately is like, well, guess I'll die.
So what I was going to say was, not until she reaches the room does she get suicidal, because there's a bit here on the prior page where she's like, Buttercup walked very slowly. There was no need to worry, not with Wesley there to stop her wedding and take her away forever. The truth of her situation did not take genuine effect until she was halfway to Humperdinck's room. So at first she was fine, but then
the more she walks,
the more the reality sets in. Yeah.
Because at one point she's like, man, I hope he thinks I'm pretty, because those nightmares took a lot from me.
Yeah. And
I hope he still thinks I'm pretty.
So then the bit with Fezzik and Inigo happens, where Fezzik, barges the door down. And then there's this bit where Buttercup's like, she's contemplating suicide. And then I love this line because I don't remember this line being in the movie. She's ready to kill herself with a 3-pointed Florinese dagger, the one.
This line is in the movie.
This line is where he's like, there are always too few perfect breasts in this world. Leave yours alone.
Yeah.
That's in the movie.
It's adapted. I think there are a few perfect breasts in this world. Would be a pity to ruin yours.
Ah, okay.
Or something like that.
So yeah, Wesley's just lying on the bed. He's
Like a suave motherfucker.
no, like a man that just barely came back from death.
Like a suave motherfucker. Like, God, he said that, and I was like, and you wonder why my standards.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And so then this moment comes where Inigo's ready to get his revenge. He's like, hello, my name is Inigo. And then fucking Count Rugen just stabs him.
Yeah, he throws a dagger.
Yeah.
Into him.
Yeah.
He throws a dagger into him, which let me tell you, when I heard that as a baby the first time, I was like, no! Wesley died! Inigo doesn't get to die! No! No, Mom!
No, Mom!
And that's where my mom stopped that chapter, because I literally freaked the fuck out on her. Just imagine a 3-year-old's little baby Cara.
Yeah.
Like, I had just gotten over, like, Wesley dying because he had come back to life, and then my mom read the line, and then the dagger rearranged his insides, and I said, what?
And this must have been a really interesting stress test for you. How many meltdowns did you have while your mother read you this story?
So many. Too many meltdowns.
Did you have very many meltdowns after this story was read to you?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So it really just didn't help. She was just poking the bear. She was just poking the meltdown bear.
She was poking the meltdown bear.
Okay.
I was a 3-year-old girl. Damn it.
Yeah.
I was like, no.
So then we have this other bit where Buttercup and Wesley are like, you know, reuniting, and you know she
and
she
he says
falls
gently,
onto him.
gently. At a time like this, that's all you can think to say, gently.
Gently, he says, much less gently.
Are you angry at me for getting married? And he says, you're not married, not in my church or any other. But the old man did pronounce. And this is a different line. Because in the book, he says, well, in the book, he elaborates, you didn't say I do, so you're not married. You never said I do.
You mean in the movie?
Yeah, in the movie, he says you never said I do. Whereas his excuse in the book is widows happen.
And widows
every day, don't they, Your Highness? And I'm just like, oh, cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Cold as ice.
Yeah, so when he's directly addressing Humperdink, who came in this room, and Humperdink's like, to the death, and Wesley's like,
to the pain.
No, to the pain. And that makes the prince pause, like, I don't think I get that. And he's like, I'll only be too happy to explain to you what I mean.
And Morgenstern says he thinks 25 minutes of safety are left. There were 5. He did not know that. How could he know that? So it's like building this tension, because we're like, he's gonna die in 5 minutes.
He's gonna die in 5 minutes.
He's gonna die in 5 minutes.
And he's gonna fucking waste his time fucking monologuing.
Fucking monologuing on Humperdink. And Rugen
is still running away.
So he's not. He's bragging.
Rugen's bragging.
He's bragging. He's like, you're the little Spanish brat. Have you been chasing me all these years only to fail now? I think that's the worst thing I've ever heard of. How marvelous. Which, can I just say, Christopher Guest did such a good fucking job making us hate Rugen. Yeah. I hated Rugen more than I hated Humperdink as a child.
He did have a greasy, smarmy look to him.
Had a greasy, smarmy look to him, and he had a way of speaking that was so cold and clinical.
Yeah.
And
which totally makes sense.
It's so,
because he was getting his doctorate in pain, you know.
He was getting his doctorate in pain.
I don't think it was.
Which is what I tell my students, because I'm in grad school. I'm almost finished with my master's degree. And my students are like, what are you studying? And I say, I'm getting my doctorate in pain. And they're like, oh, edgy.
Have you ever really said that to them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, edgy. And I'm like, shut up, child.
Shut up, child. No, so...
But Inigo's apologizing to his father, and he hears his father yell at him, I want your sorry. I died for that sword, and you can keep your sorry. If you were gonna fail, why didn't you die years ago and let me rest in peace? And he starts hearing all of his teachers screaming at him.
Yeah, and then he hears McPherson.
Spaniards, give me a Pollock anytime. At least the Pollocks remember to use the wall when they have one. Only the Spaniards would forget to use the wall.
This episode is not brought to you by
Baldur's Gate 3.
Go on.
Because they're busy ruling everybody's minds. And also, half of those characters aren't real, and they had never heard a podcast. But if they were real, Gale of Waterdeep would love this podcast. So, Larian Studios, call us. For Gale of Waterdeep. Do it for the Wizard. Sponsor us, Larian. You know you want to. Tim Downey. Get on the phone. Let's work something out.
You know, you could probably send Mr. Downey a little something with a financial incentive and be like, hey, check out our podcast.
Mr. Downey, I will pay you to listen to our podcast if you shout it out in
What's
a cameo.
it called? It's not a cameo. It's something else.
I don't know.
The other thing.
Bribery?
No. There was two things. There was two things, wasn't there? There was cameos, and then there was the other thing.
You are so descriptive.
Well, I don't remember what it's freaking called. Oh, whatever.
Describe it to me, you goose.
I don't even know what it is to describe. There's two different services for... Never mind.
Anyway.
As you can probably tell, we don't have sponsors. But if you would like us to have Tim Downey listen to our podcast, you could provide us money for us to give him. You can do that on PayPal, or you can sign up to our Patreon. That gives you ad-free episodes, or not ad-free episodes, as it were. And if you would also like to just, reach out to us, or you'd like to come to us and be like, hey, we would love to sponsor your show, you can email us at funk.lit.pod@gmail.com. That is func.lit.pod@gmail.com. Back to the show. So McPherson, he remembers McPherson's like, what do you do with a wound? He's like, cover it. And he shoves his fist in his wound. Just shoves it, which is a gross image.
Gross image.
Just gross.
But Rugen parries it.
Yep.
Rugen tries to kill him, tries to stab him in the heart, and Inigo parries it to where it goes into his left shoulder instead.
Which is fine.
And then
that won't
Rugen strikes him again, but it goes into his left arm, and Inigo doesn't even feel it.
No, I mean,
his right arm was where his interest lay, and he just starts saying, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die."
He says that a lot, and then he
does.
He finally deals the same wound to the Count that was dealt to him. He deals the slashes to his face,
his cheeks, yeah.
And then
which is different than in the book, because he keeps saying it, and then once he has him, because he delivers a stab to the Count's left shoulder and then the Count's right shoulder, and then he has him pinned, and the Count says, what do you want? And he says, offer me money, offer me fame, or offer me anything I want.
That's
power to promise me that. Well, the cuts come, offer me money, cut. Offer power that to offer me power, cut.
Oh, I see.
And then offer me anything I ask for. I want my father back, you son of a bitch. And then he stabs him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
he takes his time here.
Here it's fucked up because so he stabs to the right of the heart and then under the heart. And he's
left of the heart.
Do you know what I'm doing? He's like,
you're cutting my heart out. You took mine when I was 10. I want yours now.
Yeah.
And he dies of fear.
Yeah. That's just...
Yeah.
What a... Jesus. That is... And after all this build-up, it's very satisfying.
It's very satisfying. They take its time in the book, as opposed to the movie where you get you get stab, slash, and then stab in the heart.
Yeah.
Which, from a stage combat perspective,
which is something that she knows a lot about.
it's very satisfying to watch in the movie. I used to annoy my dad when we watched this movie together after I started learning fencing and stage combat in college. We would watch this movie at the holidays because I would count where they were landing their hits, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I would count the positions, and he would get so mad about it.
So for people that don't know anything about stage combat, do you want to explain the 5 points?
So the 5 points are in stage combat, when you do sword work, there are 5 points on the body where people strike. The left side of your body is 1-3. The right side of your body is 2-4, and 1 and 2 are your thighs. It's like right about the hip pocket. 3 and 4 are about shoulder length. That's where you want to strike when you're cutting, and that's where you're defending, where you parry. 5 is your head, so it's like an above blow. And the targets are your same for thrusts and slashes and all that fun stuff. And so when you learn how to do stage combat, and you start getting it drilled in your head, eventually, like, you start watching sword fights and you can, like, count out where they're parrying and where they're cutting. And it's very fun to do. The Princess Bride is honestly, it is the best example of sword fighting in movies, bar none. Like, I genuinely think there will never be another sword fight as cool as the ones in The Princess Bride.
We'll see.
They really... They hit the mark, and I don't think anything can top that, but I'm also very biased, so who's to say?
So then we come back to the
Wesley.
monologue, to the pain, and he's just like, here's what I'm gonna do to you, okay? I'm gonna cut off your feet, I'm gonna cut off your hands, I'm gonna cut out your eyes, and then Humperdink interrupts, and he's like, and my ears and my tongue, etc.
Well, yeah, he says your tongue, your eye, and then my ears. Shall we get on with it?
He's
and
like,
Wesley
no,
says, no,
not your
wrong.
ears.
So that every shriek of every child at seeing your hideousness will be yours to cherish. Every babe that weeps in fear at your approach, every woman that cries, dear God, what is that thing, will reverberate forever with your perfect ears. That is what to the pain means. It means that I leave you to live in anguish and humiliation and freakish misery until you can stand it no more. So there you have it, pig. There you know, you miserable vomitous mass. I say this now, and live or die, it's up to you. Drop your sword. The sword crashed to the floor.
And that dude rolled a nat 20 on his intimidation.
It was 5:55.
I don't know what relevance the time has at this point. Why does it keep bringing up the time?
Because Wesley is supposed to die again at 5:55.
Oh, I missed that when I was reading.
Like, they were saying that he only had 5 minutes left, and he was going to use that monologue.
I mean, I caught that, like, with the countdown, but, like, it was also
at
telling
the end
time.
of that, it was 5:55.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Right. Which makes sense, because it's at this moment when he starts to feel his body start to fail him.
Yeah, and Wesley says, now you will suffer to the pain. Tie him. You do it so much better, Buttercup replied. I'll get the sashes, but I really think you should do the actual tying. And Wesley says, woman, you are the property of the dread pirate Roberts, and you do what you're told. And then Buttercup's like,
all right, fine, damn.
All right, I'm on it. And Humperdink says, I wasn't afraid of you. I dropped my sword because it will be so much more pleasure for me to hunt you down.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. I am the king of the sea. I await you with pleasure.
Yeah.
Is he tied yet? Where is Fezzik? Isn't he with you? Help him up. Wesley, why does he need me to help him? Because he has no strength. Now do what you're told.
Yeah.
And Humperdink says, you were bluffing. Which I love in the movie because he's like, you were bluffing, I knew it. And then Inigo just like holds a sword to his throat and he's like, I knew it. And he stops bragging about it. And God, it's such a good.
So they all leave. They find Fezzik out in the courtyard with 4 horses, and this is actually a very important moment for Fezzik, because Fezzik explains, like, well, I lost Wesley and I didn't know what to do, so I went out here and I saw these horses and I thought, well, we'll need horses to get away, so here we go.
If we found the lady, hello, lady.
Yeah.
I love Fezzik so much. He is such a wholesome little character.
In this moment, Inigo's like, Fezzik, you thought for yourself.
Like, I'm so proud of you.
Yeah. So then
does that mean you're not mad at me for getting lost?
Yeah.
Like, bless him. Blessed baby.
So then they get on these horses and they leave. And then that's the end. No, it isn't.
No, wait. No, it's not, because we have a thing.
Yeah.
Yellen said the Brute Squad is blocking their path.
Oh, yeah.
And Yellen says they listen to me and they obey me and I am in charge of enforcement. And Buttercup says, and I am the queen.
She's the way that it's formatted. She's like, I am the queen.
Yeah.
With
A creature of infinite beauty and eyes that were starting to grow frightening.
4, 6, 8, 10, 11 E's in that queen.
That's a lot of ease. It's a lot of power.
And then
Save Humperdink, one brute said.
Save Humperdink, Yellen said. And they all left.
Actually, that was something of a fib, Buttercup said. Seeing as Lotharen hasn't officially resigned, but I thought I am the queen sounded better than I am the princess.
I agree. I you know what? I agree.
I've been going to royalty school 3 years now. Something had to rub off.
Yeah. So
I suppose I was dying again. There's another one.
Yeah, and so they run off, and then this is where we get
the Lord of Permanent Affection.
Yeah, he talks about
cute.
that. I did think was cute. He said, "I suppose I was dying again, so I asked the Lord of Permanent Affection for the strength to live the day." Buttercup's like, "I didn't know that guy existed." He's like, "Neither did I, but if he didn't exist, I didn't really want to exist either."
And then Buttercup says, "It appears to me as if we're doomed. Doomed, madam, to be together until one of us dies. I've done that already, and I haven't the slightest intention of ever doing it again. Don't we sort of have to sometime? Not if we promise to outlive each other, and I make that promise now. Oh, my Wesley, so do I." It's so sweet!
And
they're so cute.
This is where we get 2 different endings, right? This is where Goldman tells us that his father said, and then they lived happily ever after, and that was the end of the story.
But that was a lie.
And he's like, so this is what the actual ending was, which is, Buttercup's like, "Oh, my Wesley, so do I." And then they run
They
off.
hear Humperdink.
Humperdink's like, stop them. And then, they're running, and they have the fastest
Inigo's
horses in the
wound
kingdom.
reopen. Fezzik takes a wrong turn. Buttercup's horse throws a shoe.
And Wesley relapsed.
And
the night behind them was filled with the crescendoing sound of pursuit.
And they leave it with kind of a Lady and the Tiger
type effect. This was before the Lady or the Tiger, remember? What's the Lady or the Tiger?
So the Lady or the Tiger is a short story where a man is put in a pit, an arena, and he has to choose a door. There are 2 doors.
Right.
Behind one is a lady, behind one is a tiger. And we get like...
Terrible.
And the tiger will tear him apart, but he doesn't know which one is which.
The lady will tear him apart too. Hey!
And he's trying to...
Sorry. She flipped me off. Sorry, go ahead.
So they go into detail, like describing this lady, how she's like an absolutely beautiful lady, and if he picks the door with the lady, he gets to marry the lady.
Right.
But if he picks the door with the tiger, then he dies.
Yeah.
And he keeps going back and forth and agonizing over which door to pick, and it ends with him picking a door, but it ends with the door creaked open. And that's it. Like, the last line is about describing the door opening, and we don't know what's behind the door.
So we never actually see the lady or the tiger.
We don't see the lady or the tiger.
Well, damn.
We don't know if he, gets married or if he dies.
Well, damn. So the whole story is about him just kind of, deliberating over this?
Yeah.
Okay. And so he's saying this is like a Lady or the Tiger type ending because you never actually know if they got away safely happily ever after.
Yeah.
Okay. I see. And
but he goes on about he thinks that I have to say for the umpty-umpth time that life isn't fair. It's just fairer than death. That's all. I'm not trying to make this a downer. I understand. I mean, I really do think that love is the best thing in the world except for cough drops. Which such a strange quote, but I do have life isn't fair, it's just fairer than death, that's all. I do have that in my classroom, written on my board.
Really?
Yeah, and kids are like, "Oh." And whenever they say, "That's not fair," I'm like, "Don't make me tap the sign.
Don't make me tap my board.
Don't make me tap my board." And they're like, "Well, it's not fair." And then I tap the board, and they're like, "Life's not fair, it's just fairer than death." And I'm like, there you go. There you go.
So this book, interesting thing about this book, because this is the first book I've ever read that's like this. At the end, it's got a reading group guide with questions. Would you like to discuss some of these questions?
Let me find the reading group guide.
It's at the very back. I can read one too.
Yeah, well... Oh, are we not going to talk about Buttercup's baby?
That's the next episode, darling.
Oh, the next episode. You're right.
Yeah.
The reading group guide, of course.
I'll read the first one to you. In the introduction to the 30th anniversary edition, Goldman claims that he adapted The Princess Bride from a book originally written by the great Florinese writer S. Morgenstern. Throughout the rest of the novel, Goldman sustains two narratives, the tale of the Princess Bride and the story of his own involvement with it. How do Goldman's comments about Morgenstern, the publishing process, and the entertainment industry in general affect your reading of his novel?
Well, for me, I grew up with this book.
Yeah.
So it kind of shaped how I view the entertainment industry and the publishing industry, too, because it gave me like an inside look at what editing was at a very young age. And so it gave me a respect for authors and like for writers from a very young age, because I feel like that's something that's missing a lot in today's culture, is that people don't really respect how hard it is to write. And being a writer myself, it's very hard. Writing is hard. Sometimes it sucks. Sometimes you have a bunch of words in your head and you want to get it out on the page and you just can't.
Yeah.
And that sucks. So having this, like doing something like this, I don't think I could ever write something like The Princess Bride, because it's so nuanced and so well put together. Yeah. It truly is a masterpiece of literature.
Yeah.
There's a reason it's my favorite book. There's a reason I've read it so many times, and it never gets old. Like, I love this book. And it's because William Goldman did such a good job at letting his audience into his world, while also creating this fantasy world and making you believe, like, no, this was a real thing. Like, he's so convincing. He buys into his own story.
Yeah.
He really buys into it.
It's really interesting because Morgenstern, like, throughout this whole book, he's weaving truth with fiction to such a degree that it's really difficult to figure out what actually happened and what didn't. If you haven't read something like As You Wish, Carrie Elwes's memoirs. Carrie Elwes's memoirs does a very good job of, like, cutting, fact from fiction. So that was really interesting for me, like, having read that first before reading this, being able to see, okay, so that did happen, but this shit about his son is bullshit. He doesn't have a son.
He doesn't have a son.
He doesn't have a son.
2 daughters.
And he doesn't have a wife named Helen, a lawyer.
Yeah. Psychiatrist. Child psychiatrist. Helen was a child psychiatrist, not a lawyer.
Oh, well, whatever. He doesn't have that.
Yeah, he had two girls that he wrote this book for.
Just before she reaches 16, Buttercup is the envy of all the village girls. Word of her beauty reaches Count Rugen, who pays a visit to her family. What makes Buttercup discover she is in love with the farm boy she has taunted? What tone does Goldman use to describe her confession of love and Wesley's response? How does this compare with traditional episodes of fairy tale love?
She is so jealous.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, like, I get it, girl. I get it. She is so jealous.
The jealousy makes her realize.
Fuck that lady. Fuck the Countess.
Yeah.
At first she's like, oh, this woman's beautiful. And then as soon as she starts hitting on Wesley, she's like, you ugly old cow. And I'm like, damn. Yeah. Mood. And then once Wesley, like, doesn't say anything, like, she's very earnest in her confession, but as soon as Wesley's like, I got nothing to say to that, she's like, well, I was playing a prank on you. Joke's on you, bro. Haha. Get fucked, idiot. I don't actually like you, idiot. Idiot. And then Wesley's like, nah, I do love you. And she was like, oh, I was just kidding. I do love you.
Yeah.
Like,
how does this compare with traditional episodes of fairy tale love?
Oh, well, traditional episodes of fairy tale love. It's like, oh, at first sight, I loved you. I saw you, and I knew I had to have you. It was love at first sight, my darling.
Jealousy's not a factor.
Jealousy isn't necessarily a factor in fairy tale love. And neither is, just kidding, actually, idiot. I don't love you. Just kidding again, psych. Like, that doesn't ever happen, which I think it should happen more. I think that's absolutely hilarious. Like, whatever. Like, it's very much ado when you go to think about it. It's very much ado about nothing, because...
Shakespeare play.
All right.
Just for the audience.
Yeah.
Not everybody is a Shakespeare buff, Cara.
Google exists, and it's free. Am I bullying your audience? Yes, I am. I'm bullying you. Be bullied. Be bullied. Functionally literate audience.
Well, damn.
I'm just kidding.
good.
No, I'm not.
Damn.
I'm just kidding again. See, I did a Goldman. So it's very Much Ado About Nothing, because for those who don't know much Ado About Nothing, it's where we get the enemies to lovers trope.
Mm-hmm.
Because Much Ado About Nothing starts with Beatrice and Benedict, who are our main characters and our main lovers in the story, just absolutely insulting the ever-loving hell out of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they are so rude to each other. Like, at one point, Beatrice says, I would rather hear my dog bark than a man swear he loves me. He calls her my good lady disdain. Are you yet still living? Like, it's so funny. And then, like, about halfway through the play, they confess, yeah, I do like you, because they're tricked into thinking that the other one, like, is madly in love with them by their friends. And then they confess to each other, yeah, I am in love with you. But then Beatrice is like, hey, kill Claudio. And he says, bro, that's my friend. That's kind of crazy. And she's like, guess you're not a real man then. If I were a man, I'd eat his heart in the marketplace. And I'm like, fuck yeah, you would, Beatrice. Hell yeah, you would. And then there's a whole bunch of shenaniganry. But at the end, when everything's all happy, Benedict and Beatrice are, like, at the wedding of the other couple, and they're like, oh, what about you, Benedict? Are you gonna marry Beatrice? And he's like, no, I don't love her. What are you talking about? and, like, they produce this letter that Benedict wrote to Beatrice saying, oh, yeah, you do love her, actually. And then they're like, Beatrice, what about you? Do you love Benedict? And she's like, no more than reason. And she's like, in truth, I only confess to it because I wish to save you from consumption. Because they told her that he was ill with love for her. And so, like, they pull out a letter from Beatrice to Benedict that confesses how much she loves him. And then they get together and she's, like, teasing him. And he says, peace, I will stop your mouth. And he kisses her. And it's very, like, that moment reminds me a lot of Buttercup being like, I love you. Just kidding. No, I don't. Actually, I was just kidding again. Ha ha. You know.
All right. So this next question is actually multiple questions. So I want you to rattle off answers as I ask you these questions. Why does Prince Humperdink build his zoo of death?
Because he's a fucking sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot.
What is significant about the 5th level?
Oh, there's nothing there except one thing.
What's that?
It's the spider.
The what?
The spider.
Despair?
The spider.
The spider?
The spider. It's the spider.
How would you characterize the prince's brand of sadism and the sadism of Count Rugen and his life-sucking machine?
Well, the prince's brand of sadism is very much like macho man. Like, I'm a macho man.
I can
Look
beat
at my
anything.
muscles. I can beat anything. Whereas Count Rugen's sadism is very calculated. It's very cold. They're two, like, opposite sides of the same coin. Like, Humperdinck's is rooted in anger, whereas Rugen's is rooted in a genuine, like, study. Yeah. Like, he's genuinely fascinated and pain and torture. Like, he's fascinated by it. Like, he has a scientific drive to learn more about it.
Which is interesting because Humperdinck, like, you know, encourages and funds all of this, but he gets bored with it.
Yeah, he's like, whatever, Tyrone.
Yeah.
Whatever, Tyrone.
How are these elements of sadism and evil necessary to the universe of a fairy tale?
Well, you gotta have over-the-top evil in a fairy tale because you gotta have something to root for when it comes to the good guy, right? Like, you want to root against something. And so having these, like, two opposite ideals of sadism, because if you look at it, Humperdinck and Rugen are Wesley and Inigo's foils, because Wesley gets angry. Yeah. He does get angry, but he also controls that anger. He's very good at controlling his anger, and he's very good at remaining calm under pressure, whereas Humperdinck is not. Yeah. And with Inigo, he also studies pain, and he studies torture, but he doesn't use it. Mm-hmm. Like, what knowledge he has of it, he uses to defend himself and to get vengeance for his father. Like, he uses the same tools that Rugen does. He uses his mind. He uses his steel. I mean, him and Rugen are equally matched on that front. Like, but Rugen lets his fear control him. Inigo lets his fear drive him. And that's why it's important to have those two elements, because it gives us something to reflect on those two characters.
In the early part of the story, Buttercup's kidnappers are known only as the Spaniard, the Turk, and the Sicilian. But as each of these men prepares to battle the Man in Black, the reader learns the kidnapper's name, his history, and how he became part of the most effective criminal organization in the civilized world. How does this affect your reading of the subsequent battle scenes?
So, for Inigo, I immediately was like, oh, he's traumatized. Poor baby, get him some therapy. You know? Like, it helps me understand, oh, okay, this guy is good at what he does. But he's also has trauma, and he's fell out of practice, and he's getting back into practice, but he's still really good. And then with Fezzik, I was like, oh, you poor baby. All of you need therapy. Come with me. We're all going to get you therapy. That's the next stop on our journey. And you really do learn that he's a bit of a gentle giant. He never wanted to be a brute.
No, his dad
made him be a brute.
Yeah.
And it makes you sad because his parents end up dying and he's all alone, and that's something he is terrified of.
Yeah.
And when he wakes up after the fight, he can't find Inigo, he can't find Vizzini.
Yeah.
And he says, well, I'm alone. And that's utterly horrifying to the poor guy.
Mm-hmm.
With Vizzini, fuck Vizzini. Wallace-Shawn did such a good job of making that character so dislikable. He was amazing in that role. Like, you liked him, but you also wanted to punch his face.
He was so smarmy.
He was such a smarmy little shit. I do love it.
So, I feel like you pretty well answered the next question. With whom do your sympathies lie?
Well, at first, with Inigo and Fezzik, but then as soon as you find out about Vizzini, you're like, fuck Vizzini. Fuck you, dude.
Yeah.
You're a dick.
Discuss the story Wesley tells about the Dread Pirate Roberts. How does this tale within the tale influence your interest in Wesley? Is he still the same farm boy from the beginning of the book?
Well, it's really interesting that he learned all of this stuff. Like, he was so charismatic. Like, if you're looking at D&D stats for these characters, Wesley put all of his points, like, in charisma, intelligence, and dexterity. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's, and his fourth highest score is Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, and then he has wisdom. And then I think strength is his dump stat. Honestly. But I think his highest score is charisma because he convinces this guy. He says one word.
He climbed the cliffs of insanity.
He did climb the cliffs of insanity, but I would argue that's dexterity more than anything.
Okay, you say so.
I would argue that's a dexterity thing. And he just rolled really high on his cliffs of insanity climb. But we learned that he convinced the Dread Pirate Roberts, who takes no prisoners, with one word, please. He convinced him with one word, please.
Mm-hmm.
And so he took him in and he says, I am not the real Dread Pirate Roberts. My name is Ryan. Hello, Ryan.
Hi.
And so he trains him how to be the Dread Pirate Roberts. And then on his first, like, little mission as a Dread Pirate Roberts, it went terribly because nobody listened to him.
Yeah.
And then after that, the old Dread Pirate Roberts got rid of that whole crew. They got him a new crew, and then he said, I'm your first mate. You're the Dread Pirate Roberts. And then it went swimmingly from there.
Yeah.
And no, he's not the same farm boy. He has the same words, almost, but he is not the same farm boy from the beginning of the book. He has changed.
He's molded
just
a
as
personality.
Buttercup is not the same farm girl.
Yeah.
She has changed. She has a lot more grace. She has a lot more confidence in herself. And we see that in that last chapter when she says, I am the queen. She has come into her power by the end of the book.
Mm-hmm. During the scenes in which Wesley is tortured and then killed by Count Rugen and his machine, does Goldman maintain a consistent tone, or does it shift depending on whether he is describing macabre events?
Oh, his tone shifts a lot.
How does his tone shift?
It's darker. It's darker. He intervenes a lot to be like, hey, this shit sucks, pretty much. Like, you're not gonna have a good time reading this. Like, this is sad, and I need to remind you that life is unfair. Like, he keeps inserting himself to, like, reassure the audience, hey, life isn't fair.
Yeah.
Life isn't fair.
Yeah.
Like, I'm warning you right now. Life is not fair. Yeah.
Consider the romantic relationships that Goldman describes throughout the novel. Goldman and Helen, Wesley and Buttercup, Miracle, Max, and Valerie. How does Goldman portray the women in his novel? Does this say something about his views of romance and marriage, or is it all part of a joke?
Well, Goldman and Helen, like, with Helen, at the very beginning of the book, she's very clinical and she's very matter-of-fact, and Goldman hates that.
And he fantasizes about being with other women all
he
the time.
fantasizes about being with other women all of the time. With Buttercup, at first he keeps going on about how simple she is, how she's a simple farm girl, how she doesn't really have that much intelligence, how she's very beautiful, but she doesn't have a lot of smarts in her head, how she's a little bit slow at picking up on things. But by the end of the book,
She's witty.
She's very witty.
Yeah.
She's witty. She's quick on her feet. With Max and Valerie, I find them to be the most normal.
Relationship goals.
They are the most normal couple for me. Like, yes, Wesley and Buttercup are very sweet and they're very in love, but they are very much in that honeymoon stage.
Yeah.
Max
and Valerie have been
together for 80
years.
years.
Yeah.
They've been married for 80 years, and like, they balance each other out, because Max is always like, yeah, I'm not gonna do it, and Valerie's like, well, go up there and try again. What if they're a nice person? Well, what? Well, maybe you could do it for 20. And Valerie calls him out on his bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does this say something about Goldman's views of romance and marriage?
I think it's all a part of the joke.
You think it's all part of the joke?
I think it's all a part of the joke. You know, like, he wrote a story about love, and he wanted to give 3 different views of that. Well, technically 4, because the Count and the Countess are together.
Yeah.
But we only see the Countess in, like, that second chapter.
Yeah.
Or that first chapter, Buttercup.
Yeah.
And at first, like, the Count and the Countess, like, we don't get really any information about them. You know, like, we know that the Countess likes to spend the Count's money, but after that, we don't really hear much about the Countess anymore.
Right.
And I'm glad that they cut her out of the movie, because
she was superfluous.
Yeah. How did you know it was in my brain? I was just about to say that, and then you said that. Get out of my head.
It's a popular word I've developed ever since we've seen the Barbie movie. Oh, it's just ever since we saw that movie, Barbie. It's just been added to my vocabulary.
I'm just Ken, and we're built at beaten.
What surprised you most about the end of the book? Do you agree with what Goldman says about endings and about the fairness of life?
Well, when I was a kid, my mom did not say, and they lived happily ever after. You know, she read me. She did not, Tammy Lynn Martin did not hold any fucking punches when it came to reading.
So she gave you the proper ending.
She gave me the proper ending of the book.
Okay.
And so when I saw the movie, like, I was happy about it, but I was also annoyed, because I feel like a big part of the message of The Princess Bride is life's not fair, but it's okay. Like, that's okay. Like, it's okay that life's not fair.
But the movie ends with them getting married, doesn't it?
The movie ends with the best kiss of all time, which is much earlier in the book.
Yeah.
In the book, they talk about, like, the top 10 best kisses of all time, or the top 5 best kisses of all time, and how this one blew it all away. And they talk about that at their reunion.
Yeah.
When Buttercup and Wesley first, like, realize, like, when Buttercup realizes, oh, it's Wesley.
Yeah.
That's when they have that discussion. But in the movie, it happens at the very end. And I get why that happens. It's because it's a Hollywood ending, and that's what Hollywood wanted. You know, to get the movie made, Goldman had to cut some stuff from the book. And that's one of the things he cut. But I do like that they end it with the grandfather saying, as you wish, to his grandson. Because I think at the end of the day, that's really what the point of the movie is. Like, the point of the movie is about love. Yeah. And it's not just about romantic love. It's about familial love. It's about friendship and brotherly love that Inigo and Fezzik have for each other. Mm-hmm. And that familial love, ending on that note of the grandfather telling his grandson, like, after the grandson says, hey, Grandpa, will you come back tomorrow and read it to me again? and the grandfather saying, "As you wish."
Yeah.
That is just so sweet.
Yeah.
I love that that's the relationship that the movie focuses on.
But focusing on the book.
Yeah, focusing on the
do
book.
Do you agree?
I do agree.
Yeah.
I do agree. Sometimes, you can't wrap things up in a neat little bow. Life seldom happens that way. And I think it was very wise of Goldman to end the book this way because, genuinely speaking, I think had it ended any other way, it would have read as false.
Yeah.
Like, with the rest of the tone of the book, because he's been going on and on and on this entire book about how life's not fair. And then if we end it with, and they lived happily ever after.
Well, that kind of falls flat.
That falls flat. That doesn't fit with the message of the book, whereas ending it the way he did with that message of the only thing fair, like, it's life is only fairer than death. That's all. Like, life isn't fair. It's just fairer than death.
Yeah.
Like, that is the message of The Princess Bride. Like, I genuinely think that's the message of the book versus the message of the movie.
Yeah. I mean, you can do everything right and still lose.
You can do everything right and still lose. And, like, that is such an important lesson for kids to learn.
Yeah.
Teaching middle school, the amount of times that I hear, that's not fair, because middle schoolers have this sense of justice.
A very strong sense
They
of
have
justice.
a very strong sense of justice about what's fair and what isn't fair, and they will not hesitate to tell you what they think.
But it's very warped. I often find what they think isn't fair is just whenever it just doesn't go their way.
Yeah, and I think that if more kids read The Princess Bride, we would have less of that.
Maybe you should...
Parents, read your children The Princess Bride.
Do it.
Do it.
Oh, gosh. In addition to writing the novel, The Princess Bride, Goldman also wrote the screenplay for the 1987 film adaptation directed by Rob Reiner. How does Goldman... What? No way. We haven't been just comparing the two the entire time.
What?
How does Goldman...
It's almost as if this was my, hyperfixation when I was a child.
Yeah. How does Goldman describe his experiences in both publishing and Hollywood? How does the book compare to the film? What plot changes do you notice, and why do you think they were made? So, we've kind of been doing this the entire time we've been discussing this. So I feel like it's... Unless you want to, I feel like it's okay to skip this question.
Yeah, I think it's okay to skip this question. We've been talking about it the whole time.
The Princess Bride was originally published in the 1970s. Does it reflect the trends of this time period, or does the original publication date seem surprising? What is its place in American literary history? How is the book also timeless? Because, it was published in 1978.
What?
It was published in 1978.
No, 1973.
What?
1973. Buttercup's Baby, the chapter of Buttercup's Baby, came out in 1998.
Oh.
For the 25-year anniversary.
No, you're right. 73.
73.
Well, anyways.
It's been 50 years since this book came out.
Mm-hmm.
And it holds a very special place in a lot of people's hearts, I think. There's some wording in here that's a little bit not PC, like Max calls Inigo a spick.
He does.
At one point, which, for those not in the know, that is a slur for Latino people and Spaniards. There's a reason why we avoided talking about that. But
also, I mean, we discussed a bit about this in one of our earlier episodes of this book, like his comments about overweight people. His comments about
like that woman and the prequel, like prologue chapters before the story actually starts.
Yeah.
Like there's some not politically correct language that's in it, like politically correct that we would see today.
Yeah.
Like
things that
the patter, the banter and the patter is very 1970s-esque to me.
Yeah.
Like the patter and the banter.
Yeah.
In the book.
But it cannot be denied that there are things in this book that if an editor saw them, they'd be like, hey, you need to change this.
Yeah. Like if they saw them today, they'd be like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right. Unless it was Stephen King, and then they'd be like, Stephen.
Is this a choice?
This is a choice, Stephen. Stephen.
How is the book also timeless?
I mean, most of the book, it's about like its themes are not set in a certain time. Whereas when you read a Stephen King book,
he
it's time.
establishes the time pretty well immediately,
Like-
if not directly, just like in
Like, you can set, like, when I read it for the first time, I was like, oh, this is the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, immediately, I was like, oh, this is the 80s.
Yeah.
When I read The Shining for the first time, I was like, oh, this is definitely the 70s. This is the 70s. Whereas when I'm reading The Princess Bride, like, I only get that in the prologue chapters where he's talking about himself.
Yeah.
Which, that makes sense. But then when he is, like, talking about editing, I could see some of that stuff happening today.
Yeah.
Like, I could see some of those edits happening today, like those little self-inserts, like some of the stuff he talks about. Especially, like, when they talk about Max and Valerie being Jewish, I could see that happening today.
Yeah.
And then the story itself, I mean, it's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
You know? It is a spin on a fairy tale. And while the banter kind of reads a little 70s-esque, it's still something that circles back. You know, like, there's just something about the way that they speak that is so relatable.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you could picture people actually saying it. And I think that's what makes it timeless.
How should The Princess Bride ultimately be categorized? Satire, adventure, romance, fantasy? Is the title ironic? Does it imply a tame love story or a more traditional piece of children's literature?
I don't think you can categorize The Princess Bride. I think The Princess Bride is a category all its own. And I think that's another reason why it's timeless, is because it doesn't fit into one specific genre.
This was part of the problem with marketing the movie.
Yeah.
They couldn't
figure out.
The marketers just could not fucking figure it out.
And I think that's why so many people love it, is because it's so many different things at once, but that's why Hollywood hated it.
It's why it didn't sell well initially, but it became a cult classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's why it didn't sell well. It's why Hollywood hated it, but it's why people loved it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's why the general audience, like, when it came out on VHS, it's why they were like, oh, this is great. It has something for everybody. As for the title being ironic, I think it's both. You know, I think it implies, like, a tame love story, but it also implies, like, oh, children like princesses, and they like weddings, and they like reading about love. But it's, in essence, like, honestly, my mom probably had no business reading this to me as a 3-year-old child.
No,
like,
she had
no
absolutely
business.
no business. You should have been 6 or 7.
I should have been at least 6 or 7, but I was 3, and it shaped a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
You know, when my mom first said, oh, we're going to read The Princess Bride, I was like, ooh, pretty princesses. I love that. I love pretty princesses and pretty dresses. And she's like, oh, you're not getting any of that. You're not getting any.
There's a smidge of that.
There's like a smidge, but it's not about that.
No.
It's about so much more. And that's what drew me in was pretty princesses. But what kept me was the story.
Yeah.
Behind all of that.
Mm-hmm.
The story beyond all of that. And, you know, it's one of the books that got me into reading.
Yeah.
When I was a child.
Yeah.
I was quite a voracious reader as a kid.
Yeah.
And I was reading well above grade level, and The Princess Bride was one of the reasons why. You know, I wanted to read as many books as I could, and when I met Carrie Elwes in 2019, it was just a delight to be able to tell him, like, listen, this movie, like, the book changed my life. And I had his memoir, and he signed my copy of his memoir. And he was just a very sweet guy.
He
and
also
he says,
signed your shirt.
He did sign my shirt. Unprompted, might I add. I was just standing there because I wore a Death Cannot Stop True Love shirt.
Yeah.
And he said, oh my God, I love your shirt. Where'd you get it? And I was like, Attic Salt. And he said, write down the address, write down the name of the store for me. And while I was writing it down, I felt like a Sharpie on my shirt. And I was like, whoa, what's happening? And he's like, hold still, I'm signing your shirt. And I was like, what? No, but the memoir. And he said, oh, I'm going to sign both. And I said, but I only paid for one. And he said, I don't care. And I said, oh my God, you don't have to. And he's like, I know I don't have to. You're very sweet. You deserve both. And like,
yeah,
I like legit, I nearly started crying. And he was like, you were like the sweetest person I've met today. And I was like, that's hard for me to believe, but okay. Because I got to the, like, literally when I found out he was going to Kansas City, I called Ryan and I said, hey, we're going.
Yeah.
we're going to Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And then the next day they said Chris Sarandon's going to be there. And I was like, okay, well, now we're really going. Like, I'm meeting them. And I did. That was the first thing I did. I drove down to Kansas City the morning of the Comic-Con ahead of Ryan. And the first thing I did when I checked in was I got in line for Cary Elwes. And I bought VIP passes specifically to make sure that I could meet him. So I got in the VIP line. And he's a very sweet guy. Chris Sarandon is also very sweet.
Yeah.
Like, let it be known. Chris Sarandon is also a very sweet man. I met him as the con was closing down. I was just, like, collecting my stuff, and I ran into him on the way out, and he was very sweet. And I said, I loved your wife in Into the Woods. And he was like, oh, you're a theater nerd. You're my people. And I was like, Chris Sarandon said I'm his people?
Yeah.
And he gave me a hug. He was very sweet. Like, that's one of the things I really enjoy about this cast of people is that all of them are, like, really good people. Like, Robin Wright is an activist. Cary Elwes has been raising money for charities and donating money and raising awareness for issues using his platform. Chris Sarandon does the same thing. Wallace Shawn is a very intelligent playwright. He's very well spoken. He's amazing.
Even though
Mandy Patinkin is a very vocal activist.
Yeah.
He uses his TikTok and he uses his popularity to raise money for charities and his activism causes. And I think that's just part of why I love this movie so much, because the people behind it were good people.
Yeah.
Like,
Makes sense.
they still are. Like, if something came out saying, hey, Cary Elwes is actually a bad person, I think I would, like, lock myself in my room.
I don't know
for
if you'd
a few
actually
days.
believe it.
I would have a really hard time with that if something were to come out that said, hey, Cary Elwes is a bad person. I would have a really hard time with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because these people are role models. Like, people grew up on this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why it's one of the most quotable movies. There's a reason why people watch it today. And it's because the people involved in it wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Like, they genuinely loved what they were doing, and they're people that people enjoy being around.
As I recall in the memoirs, it was a bittersweet experience when the filming was over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very bittersweet, because, you know, you spend all that time getting attached to a character and getting attached to your cast, and then you have to leave each other.
Yeah. I think we gotta wrap up now.
I think we gotta wrap up
now. If you want to, if you haven't already, because we've talked about it a lot, check out the movie. And check out the Cary Elwes' memoirs about the movie.
The memoirs are called As You Wish.
Yes. And I will have links to that in the episode description. So that's it-ish. We are going to have one more episode where we are going to talk about Buttercup's baby. In this book, there is one chapter of Buttercup's baby. There was only ever one chapter, and we will get into the hows and whys of that next episode. See you later. Bye.
Bye.